Hello and welcome back to Just Follow Joy. My name is Ariana, not Joy, and I'm human design guide and teacher. And today we're doing something a little bit different on the show. I don't think I've ever actually done this before because I'm giving you a sneak peek into one of my courses. I'm actually giving you a whole lesson module of the 9 Energy Centers course because I was just thinking the other day about how important it is to understand how the heart center works. If you don't know, the heart center is also called the will center or the ego center, the resource center. It has so many different names. I don't know why this one in particular has like a million different labels, but I think that the heart center is possibly the most important energy center to understand, whether you have it defined or undefined. And so thinking about this the other day, and also the fact that like I did not have an episode lined up for this week, I haven't for a while, I figured that this would be a really interesting thing to talk about. And if you want to learn about all 9 of your energy centers, you can do that with the 9 Energy Centers course. I'm going to have a link to that down below. You can buy it on its own if you want, or you can access this and any other course in the Just Follow Joy library in the Just Follow Joy membership. So if you get the gold membership, which is $77 a month, you can access all of this stuff. And it's multiple thousands of dollars worth of courses. But you can kind of pick and choose whatever you want. And quick reminder, you are never, ever locked into this membership. It is month to month. So if you decide that you don't like it anymore and you've gotten what you needed from it, that's totally okay. You can cancel at any time. And we're just happy to have you around when we have you around. But with all that said, we're going to dive in a minute. Before we do, I just want to remind you that if you like Just Follow Joy, if you love Just Follow Joy, it would be so very helpful to me, the channel, and the show, if you could like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or if you are listening on any kind of podcast platform, if you can leave a 5-star rating review. These are truly the best ways to get the show out in front of other people who will like and love it. So that is it. And let's learn about the heart center. Also, one last thing, for the first few minutes of this episode, for the rest of it, the sound is a little tinny, and it's because I forgot that my microphone was not plugged in, but the rest of it is fine. I did not want to redo it because I have an undefined heart center, which means I have nothing to prove, and you'll understand what I mean by that in just a little bit. Okay, that's it. Next, we have the heart center. And the heart center is one that I think we don't talk about nearly enough because it is a very small center with only 4 gates coming out of it, but it can really pack a punch. It's very important. And I think it has a much stronger effect on most of us than we even realize. Actually, I don't think that. I know that. So the heart center is, among other things, about motivation, drive, and willpower. It's really about proving energy, meaning proving you can do or achieve or obtain or fulfill a promise that you made, whether that's to yourself or to someone else. And it can be felt as this need to prove yourself, like I want to prove myself, but it can also just feel like pure drive. So another way that you can describe this is really, I want that energy. It's a kind of desire energy, but it's not the same as like the sacral center because the sacral center is just, ooh, how exciting. I want to do that. That lights me up. I'm drawn to that. This is ooh, I want to get that. It fills me with so much drive. I would put in so much to get that thing. I would push through and use my willpower to make it happen. The center also has a lot to do with resources and controlling resources. So a lot of the themes in the center are based on the material plane, and have to do with themes like managing money or getting money, which is, again, only one kind of resource. But for example, too, this can have to do with, obtaining fame or status or being a leader in your circle. So the energy isn't necessarily always about tangible things you can hold on to, like a dollar bill, or I guess you can hold on to a house if you really try and stretch, but these physical, tangible things or material things, because that's not always the motivation for these people. Whatever the motivation is or whatever the goal is, though, the heart center has to do with that drive to accomplish it and the energy behind that to make it happen. And by the way, you may notice that this center, if you read about it in other places, it has a lot of names. So I have 2 here. I call it the heart center, but traditionally it's called the ego center or the will center. And any of these are accurate. Like it could be called the resource center as well in some circles. So whatever you want to call it is really fine. I like to call it the heart center, especially because when you call it the ego center, people kind of freak out or they think it's a bad thing when really it's not. And actually, it is a good thing for us to take a second to talk about that, because this center is called the ego center, not because it represents a shadow or anything like that. It doesn't represent like all the bad parts of you, right? It represents the me or the I energy in our life. It's all about asking, how can I have that? How can I achieve that? What does this have to do with me and my desires and what drives me? And the thing about this kind of energy is, even though we may not always see how that's a good thing, like it really can be, because this energy is the same energy that inspires people to own their ambition and just go do it and know that they're worth it. And what's actually interesting about the heart center is that only one gate coming out of it, so only one theme of the heart center, is truly individual. The other three parts of the ego center are about your tribe, or it's about other people. So the ego center is about owning your own drive and ambition, but the underlying motivation a lot of the time, again, even if it's not conscious, these people don't realize this is what they're doing, it is to provide and keep the group going. So it often looks like it's for the sake of the individual, but at the same time, it could not be. And of course, there are ways to use this center, whether you have it defined or not, to act in selfish ways and live in scarcity mindset and think that you live in this zero-sum game where it's you or me who gets to succeed and it's not going to be you. Of course, that's the case. We can get into the shadow expression of any of the energy centers as we've seen, but it doesn't have to be used that way. Ego center energy is not inherently bad. And then lastly, and very, very importantly, like I mentioned, it has to do with feelings of self-worth, which is a really big one. And we're going to go into more of that with each of the definitions, defined and undefined. Right, I had a quick little costume change. Don't mind me. So someone with a defined heart center creates their own motivation and willpower energy and has consistent access to it. And this will show up as them being consistently motivated. And I want to make a note here, we will go over this in a little bit, but there is a big difference between being consistently motivated and being constantly motivated. These people have consistent motivation. They also have a very consistent and fixed sense of value, meaning how they determine value for things, like what value they see in things. They determine that for themselves, and it's also pretty consistent the way that they do that. And that is whether it's how they value themselves or how they value other things, like price points and things like that. The gift of the defined heart center is that these people are very highly motivated most of the time. And there are times when they don't look like that, but most of the time they really do. They can just astonish the people around them with everything that they can accomplish. And they also naturally have a sense of their own worth, particularly in terms of what they can do, what they can fulfill, what they can accomplish. And the challenge for these people is using this motivation energy correctly, because they can use it incorrectly to make promises that A, they either can't really fulfill, or B, are not supposed to be fulfilling because they are not the right person for it and this thing is not the right thing or agreement for them. Or on the other hand, the challenge can be learning not to suppress your own power, because for whatever reason you think it's not a good thing to be so motivated or to want so much or to try to achieve so much. So people with defined heart centers are the minority of the population. They're about a third of the population right now, which is so funny because we are all treated like we should have consistent motivation and willpower like these people, but most of us don't. It's really only these people who are meant to operate in that way. And like I said, again, these people have consistent motivation, but that does not mean it's constant motivation, because the heart center is a motor center and works on a pulse. So this has a pretty clear-cut on-off cycle. So there are going to be times when that energy is just off. And just like anyone else, they are not always motivated, and they are not really meant to be. And actually, it can look a little crazy to other people because someone with a defined heart center is designed to like go so hard for a certain period of time, whether that's a few days or a few weeks, maybe a couple of months, whatever, and then kind of crash and suddenly need a lot of rest, or are just not as motivated at all, or just aren't motivated at all. I have a friend whose doctors actually, it's so funny, like they thought there was something wrong with her, the way that she functioned. They were like, what, like, why do you do this? Like, why do you operate this way? This isn't healthy. But that's actually just the way that her energy works. It's this very clear cut, I'm very motivated, I'm very not motivated. And during that sort of off cycle, it can feel like this rest cycle. So if you have a defined heart center, it might be that you can't even get yourself to do anything. And you'd probably be annoyed if somebody made you try to work during that time. But in those times when they are in an on period, I guess you could call it, they look so powerful. They're just so driven. They go for what they want. They don't let things stop them. And depending on which of the heart center gates are activated for them in their chart, these people may want a lot for themselves in life overall. And it might become very clear during those like surges of motivation that they got to go get it. So to some people, someone with a defined heart center may look like they're going for way too much, or their dreams are too big, or they just like want too much or expecting too much. And so someone else might kind of go like, geez, calm down, like, relax. Why isn't this good enough for you? Which is really funny because so many of us are knocked for not being that way. And then when someone with a defined heart center shows up with wanting a lot or going for a lot, some people are like, greedy, selfish, stop it, push that down. So it's kind of like who wins, right? But this wanting a lot is so correct for them. This wanting to expand and get to that next thing and go for more and more and more, because the heart center is all about, really at the end of the day, like creating and obtaining resources. So that's what these people are driven to do. It's literally the job of the defined heart center to create and obtain that stuff. So their desire is divine, truly. It's a part of how they play out their purpose. If you have a defined heart center, that's very important for you to know. This motivation, this drive, it's for a reason, even if you don't consciously see it. So these people overall, and unsurprisingly, usually look very determined and seem incredibly steadfast in their goals. They tend to be the people others really admire for that, because it's an energy that it's so promoted in most societies, right? It's a very enviable gift for most of us to have that kind of motivation to rely on. So because these people have access to this motivation, willpower, and proving energy as well, remember there's proving energy of what you can do, they are here to prove themselves. These are the people who are really meant to challenge themselves to do things or take on other challenges from other people. It's very correct for them. And the other thing to know is that when they're doing this, they are naturally proving themselves. They say that the defined heart is like always doing that naturally. So it's not something you have to like try to do. You're going to be drawn to doing it. And this can be this kind of like, I'll show you feeling, but it's actually quite healthy for the defined heart center because they need an outlet for all of that motivation energy. It's just how they're wired. So they don't necessarily always come off as highly competitive people, but they are people who can handle competition pretty well. They're like, yeah, I can do it. I'll show you I can do it. I've got it. Like it's wired to want to do that. And so it's naturally drawn to it. And another really cool thing about someone with a defined heart center is that other people will be really motivated when they're around this person. They're naturally motivational and inspirational to other people to achieve more, to push themselves. However, that energy leaves the room when they do. So if someone has this in their chart and they have people who work under them or work around them in a team, it's really easy for the defined heart center to be like, how is nothing done? Like, why is everyone else so slow? Why do they need so many breaks? Like, I could have gotten all this work done in half the time. What's going on? Or just think that other people are lazy or they're not driven. When the truth is that most people aren't built to be so solidly motivated like they are. So when somebody with a defined heart center leaves the room, they bring that energy with them. So you could go on your lunch and come back and be like, what changed? These are different people. You guys aren't working as much. And because the defined heart center has all this energy to push through and make something happen, these people are also the types of people who can make a promise and really, really see it through. So it's healthy and correct for them to make promises, as long as they're the correct ones for them. So when someone with a defined heart center commits to a program or a 30-day challenge or doing something for someone else, they're the ones who can keep showing up for that, even if they don't really want to. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm doing this because I made a commitment and I can do it. So I'm going to pull through on that. However, it's really important for them only to make promises they can and intend to keep. Not just for their own health, but because if they don't do that, they will either lose other people's faith in them or they will be blamed for tricking those people. Like, you said you could do this and you did that because you just wanted something out of me and you aren't fulfilling your side of the deal. That's where we get that whole like shadow side representation of the defined heart center that a lot of people associate with really ambitious people, right? It's not everybody. It's when these people aren't fulfilling promises that they agreed to make. Or on the other hand, they can put themselves into a situation where they feel really trapped and misaligned because they are keeping this promise, like they're holding to their integrity, but they don't actually want to do it. It feels misaligned for them and crappy, and they might overwork themselves and get into burnout because they're putting their energy into this thing that's just, it's not correct for them. They also have, like I said, a really consistent sense of value. So when it comes to, pricing or how much they'll pay for something, or generally just how much something is worth, like they determine that for themselves. They determine whether that's true or not on their own. So that means that they have a very reliable and clear idea of what is worth what to them. And that doesn't depend on how someone else values things. So Eden Carpenter, who is a human design professional who I love learning from, she says that it really does not matter how many bells and whistles and bonuses or whatever someone puts on an offer. If she doesn't see the value, she does not see the value. And you're not going to be able to convince her otherwise. And this is cool because this is where the reputation for not really being able to like be tricked into buying something from a value standpoint comes from. However, on the other hand, that does mean that these people can't really see value from someone else's perspective. It's not that they wouldn't want to. It's just that like with any defined center, like they create that energy for themselves and thus see that thing through a filter. So all they can really see when they assign value to something is really based on how they would value it, not from how someone else might value that. And like I said before, they also know their own value and worth, and they have a very consistent sense of that. So in traditional human design, they say these people have an innate sense of self-worth, and I would really adjust that to say that these people have an innate sense of what they can do and what they can achieve. So they know what they're capable of. Because the thing is that you will meet plenty of people with defined heart centers who do not have high self-worth and do not think that they are enough and have very low self-worth and low self-esteem. And the reason for that is there are so many ways to think that you are not correct, or you are not being the person you are meant to be, or you're wrong. And there are so many other centers that you can be conditioned through. And if you think that you're not correct, you're gonna have low self-worth and low self-esteem, whether you have a defined heart center or not. And there are lots of projectors out there with defined heart centers who think that they are not important or worthwhile because they can't work as much as someone with an undefined sacral center. Or there are people with undefined mind centers who feel like they're dumb because they're not always certain. For people with a defined heart center, they're just not as likely to feel like they're not worthy because they can't accomplish something. That's the big thing. Like these people, they know what they can do. It's solid, it's reliable for them. And so it's much, much, much less likely that this person will say like, I'm worthless, I'm a piece of shit, over how much they can accomplish and how much they can do. That's just a lot less likely because their body knows that they have the energy to stay motivated, stay consistent with things. So the defined heart is such an awesome thing to see in its healthy expression. It's so beautiful. These people will own their own desires. They know that they are divine. They know that they are meant for them. They don't doubt them or squash them down in order to seem smaller. They say, I want that, I'm going for it. Or I want that, I got it. And no one can stop me. They also will have a strong sense of self-worth and self-esteem. And they will empower others through motivation. And it will feel good to be around this energy. And the defined heart also trusts what it can do and doesn't push itself past that or withhold its energy from fulfilling a promise that it wants to make and knows it can do. Now, in misalignment, I actually wouldn't even say that the misaligned defined heart center is where a lot of like the shadow of the heart center comes from. I would say it's the misalignment of the undefined heart center. So just keep that in mind. But the first thing I'll say is that these people actually, like, rather than being egomaniacs, which can happen because they know how much they can do, they know they're really powerful and they can get what they want. That's a possibility, but honestly, what I more commonly see is people with defined heart centers suppressing their power or desire. Because the truth is that in a world where most people don't have this, it can be kind of intimidating to other people, and they feel that pressure of the motivation and willpower energy, the energy to prove themselves, and so they can consciously or unconsciously condition people with defined heart centers to suppress their own power or desire because they feel uncomfortable around it. It's like, no, I don't like that. Don't do that. Stop it. You're trying to control me. When someone with a defined heart center might not be doing that at all. It's just that someone with an undefined heart center is like picking that up and it's stressful for them. It doesn't make them feel good. So in misalignment, the defined heart center will lean into that and say, you're right. I shouldn't do that. It's a bad thing for me to be so powerful or so motivated or want so much. I should settle. I shouldn't be that way. Or I'm not powerful. Don't look over here. Not me. Couldn't be me. They'll also get into burnout from committing to too much or committing to the wrong things. And the thing is, because these people usually love a challenge and they love proving themselves and how much they can do, they can kind of get addicted to it and rely on it a little too much. So they can start putting this heart center energy into anything and everything, even if it's not right for them, just because they can. Right? Again, motor center problems. And I actually had a podcast guest once who described the heart center as sort of this like runaway train if you're not aware of it and you don't live by your strategy and authority. And these people can get like so burnt out. And it's kind of like the root center. Actually, it's almost exactly like the root center in this way, where you're always going to have the energy there, but unless there's like a push, it's not time to use it. So just like someone like me who has a defined root center, like I can waste a lot of my time trying to use my root center pressure on things that aren't right for me just because like I don't want to sit still, like I don't want to not be doing something. The same can be the case with the defined heart center. So when they're in a rest period, there might be a situation where they're thinking like, no, I need to keep doing this. I need to show up in the way that I do when I naturally am feeling motivated. And then that's a big way that they will burn themselves out too, because they don't actually have the motivation push there right now. The energy is just kind of like lying in wait, and it actually needs to like build up again. But because these people are so used to being motivated all the time, in those rest cycles, they can go like, nope, gotta keep going. Nope, gotta keep going, much to their own detriment. And the thing about the way that the defined heart burns out is it's fascinating. It's much likely to happen a lot later than someone with the undefined heart center. It's kind of like how the defined spleen center can cover up that someone's sick because it's working overtime. The defined heart center will be like, yeah, I'm kind of tired, but I can keep going, until they have like one really big crash, and not in a good way. It's like they've really overextended themselves. And so what will happen is these people will burn out too. They'll crash too, just like the undefined heart center would. But it's like where the undefined heart center would crash like here, like I can't keep going. We just don't have the motivation energy for it. Someone with the defined heart center will go like, crash over here. And it's gonna be bad. It's just gonna be later on. These people will also not keep their promises. And of course, everyone like once in a while can't fulfill a promise or make good on a promise, but it will be like more common for these people that they don't do it. And that's not good for the people around them, but also not good for the person with the defined heart center, because then other people will start to not trust them or even blame them, like I said before. And the person with the defined heart center will probably blame themselves too, and then actually think that they're not capable of fulfilling promises when that's not true. And then sometimes, it's rare that I meet people with defined heart centers who are actually like this. Sometimes they can be demanding, domineering, and put themselves above other people. Like I said, I think this is what most people expect the shadow of a defined heart center to be. And it is possible, and you can recognize it when you can see it for sure. This person will basically, look very powerful and use that to bulldoze other people and put themselves at the top at the expense of others, or just trick them and take advantage of them because they see what they want. They'll do anything to get it, including using someone else as a stepping stone. That's a really unconscious way of using the defined heart. But truly, in general, I see more people suppressing the energy of the defined heart because they think like, ooh, this is not a good look. Like, people are gonna think I'm like that, so I should really push this down more, or else I'm gonna look overbearing, or I'm gonna look like a bulldozer. So my advice to you is, first off, I think this is obvious, your desires are so divine. So don't make them or yourself smaller. It's not going to work anyway. You're just going to feel really unfulfilled. And that's actually part of why people with defined heart centers can have this low self-worth. It's because their soul knows like they're really meant for more. They're meant to go for a lot more, but they're constricting themselves and restricting themselves. And that's not going to feel good. And it's just going to develop this this dissonance within them. And then also understand that others they don't have the same level of willpower as you do, and that's okay. It's not that they're lazy. It's that they just don't operate the same way that you do. They're not as consistently motivated, and they're just not meant to be. That's only for someone like you. Also, just because you can doesn't mean you should. You probably can do a lot of stuff with a defined heart center and prove to other people that you can, but is it worth it? Like, do you actually want to be doing this thing? If not, if you don't have that, then the motivation isn't there right now, and you need to wait for something that actually does motivate you. And then lastly, follow your strategy and authority when making commitments. There are some people whose authority is based on the ego center. These are ego projectors and ego manifestors. But in all, they're about 3% of the population. It's either 3 or 8%, I can't remember. Very small percentage of the population. So when it actually comes to using your defined heart center energy, what's interesting is that's going to be based on another center that tells you whether that's true or not. So really listen to that center, listen to your authority, and obviously follow your strategy of your energy type. And that is going to tell you where to put your heart center energy in order to make commitments that are right for you, that you can follow through on, and that work out for everyone. Now, on the other hand, if someone has an undefined heart center, they do not create this kind of motivation or willpower energy for themselves. They pick it up and they amplify it from people who have defined heart centers. So we are built then to have inconsistent motivation because we don't create this for ourselves, and it's highly dependent on whoever we're around. This is normal for us. It's okay. And people like us can still be very successful. In fact, accepting that we are not meant to be consistently motivated and not concerning ourselves with spending our time trying to show that we are consistently motivated will actually help us achieve what we want to achieve much more easily and with a lot more flow. So there are multiple gifts to somebody who has an undefined heart center, but one of the biggest ones is that they're actually really, really good at identifying who is capable. And more importantly, who is capable of doing what they say they will do. So who can hold their commitments, who can fulfill their promises, who should be in charge, that kind of thing. On the other hand, they can really struggle with feelings of unworthiness, specifically around what they can do or what they can accomplish on a consistent basis. That means they can get really caught up in trying to prove themselves and waste their lives doing things to show that they are powerful and good enough. So you might have picked up on this by me saying that a minority of the population has a defined heart center, but the majority of the world has an undefined heart center. You're looking at one of those people right now. We're about 2/3 of the population. So all of this means that what I'm about to tell you is true for most people, and actually important to know even if you have a defined heart center, because this is going to be most of the people you interact with. And like I said, these people are built for inconsistent motivation. So just like someone with a defined heart center is not motivated all the time, it doesn't mean these people are always unmotivated. They don't necessarily even look like super unmotivated people, but they don't have naturally that same consistent access to this kind of energy and should not expect themselves to in the way that the defined heart center does. And I'm going to be so honest with you, when most people learn that they have this in their chart, including myself, they're like, oh, fuck, why? Right? I don't want that. I want consistent motivation because for a couple of reasons. First, it looks like people who have defined heart centers, those are going to be the people who always succeed, or the only kinds of people who would succeed, because consistent motivation, like we're told that's the golden ticket. And also because it can make people with undefined heart centers feel like they won't ever be able to prove themselves, which is often a thing that we've lived with for a lot of our life. And so it can feel sort of like this sentence to like, you're never going to feel worthy, which is so not the case at all. And also something to know about the undefined heart center is just like any other center, I'm going to say this over and over again, just like any other center, when it's undefined, you do not need that energy around consistently to create what you want to create, manifest what you want, achieve a goal, whatever. Like you don't need that to thrive and succeed. So with an undefined heart center, people like us don't need that consistent motivation to create what we want in life. We don't need it to create abundance or achieve a goal or whatever. And that's actually one of the biggest lessons we can learn with this center in our chart. We can have what we want without being so strongly or consistently motivated like the defined heart center, and without looking that way too. So I have an undefined heart center, and I can tell you that things actually go much more smoothly for me in getting what I want when I don't concern myself so much with proving myself or doing things like pushing through to show myself I can do it or fulfilling a promise to myself. And instead, just accepting when that I feel that motivation and accepting when I don't feel that motivation. And that's actually been how I progress in life, and I've made the most progress in my life. It's really not what holds me back. So the issue here arises when these people don't think that it's actually possible to do that. Like that's the main problem. Like we think the issue is that we don't have motivation all the time, but actually the real problem is that we get really caught up in trying to be motivated all the time and then do things that make us look that way or prove ourselves. And then we get really, really stuck in, how it looks if we're not consistently pushing through with willpower. And then we think there's something wrong with us if we can't muster up willpower to do something, especially on a regular basis. And this is very fair. Like motivation and drive and willpower are seen as strengths in almost every society. So we're unconsciously conditioned through this energy, but we're very, very consciously conditioned through this energy too, because it's this idea that, if you were more dedicated or you just were in crunch time all the time, then you would have everything that you want or that you say you want. And on top of that, if you aren't consistently driven, then that's a moral failure because you're lazy. So there is something wrong with you. There's something incorrect with you. And you should be able to change that about yourself. So we can pick up on that and feel it really, really strongly. But that's something that is just not fair to expect of ourselves or to expect of anyone with an undefined heart center. And more importantly, it's not even helpful or true to say to them. And let me tell you too, there are lots and lots of successful and well-known people who do not have defined heart centers. Lots of them. Because by the law of very large numbers, most people have undefined heart centers. So most of the people out there who are successful, they're not just people with defined heart centers. Those people are rare overall, or rarer overall. So, Oprah has an undefined heart center. Elon Musk has an undefined heart center. Donna Summer, Aretha Franklin, don't know why I'm naming. I always have so many musicians in the back of my mind whose charts I've looked at. And actually Oprah and Elon Musk, they don't just have undefined heart centers, they have completely open heart centers. So no gates coming out of them. I do as well. And I guarantee you too that there are people in your personal life who you look up to or have succeeded immensely who have undefined heart centers or even an open one. And it's actually really common, again, to have a completely open heart center because there are so few gates in the heart center. So it's possible to just not have any of them. And another thing I want to tell you is that there are having a defined heart center is not a guarantee of success, especially if they don't use their energy correctly. There are lots of people with defined heart centers who struggle. They are not what they themselves would identify as successful, or they have issues hitting their goals or whatever. So it's not this given, and that's just really a really important thing to know. Also, what's interesting about these people, and will make sense in a second, or if you just think about it, these people are actually the ones who will usually look like they outwork everyone or are just so goddamn ambitious, or they're overachievers or very competitive, maybe even overly competitive. And that's because they don't just take on this willpower, motivation, energy, again, undefined center, they amplify it. And then they feel like they will have to do something with that energy. So many of them can become overachievers. And that's not a bad thing to have ambition and to want to achieve. Of course, that's okay, no matter what your design. However, we have to look at intention here, right? What's the reason for this? And a lot of the time for these people, it comes from trying to deal with the pressure of this proving energy, trying to prove I am enough. And that's why I'm doing so much. which is truly not the best thing for them because a hugely important thing to know, and this is why I put this in bold, if you're watching this as a video, you'll see that these people are not here to prove themselves. It is so, so important to know that. If they are doing something just to prove they can, or, for example, just to show the world how much money they can make, or show their dad that he was wrong about them, they're going the wrong way. Because proving energy is not a consistent source of wisdom in their chart. That's not them. That's not their soul. They can't depend on that being like their soul telling them which way to go. It's so variable for them and so dependent on who they're around and what's going on around them. And this is really where that whole thing about that sense of self-worth comes in for these people. And also where this can become about the ego in a negative way. Because for people with undefined heart centers, this proving energy usually that does feel like a pressure to achieve and do and work and hit goals and be a boss. So when they can't consistently make that happen, it just makes them feel like they naturally aren't good enough. Or like even when they can't hold a promise to themselves. Like they said that they would run every day for 30 days and like they ran for 3 days and they just like couldn't keep it up. That kind of thing can make them think like, what's wrong with me? Like I should be able to prove to myself I can do this. So that's part of the reason why it's often really hard for people to learn that they have an undefined heart center in their human design chart too, because a lot of them already feel like they're missing something and they need to prove that they're worthy and they matter. Like they need to do something or obtain something or create a resource in order to prove that. But that's not true. If you have an undefined heart center, my note to you is that you are good enough, but it's kind of similar to like how the undefined spleen center thinks it's not equipped to survive in the world on its own. It's all an illusion, right? It's just because we feel less solid and consistent there. And because also we are so trained to think that we need to be consistent everywhere, especially in terms of motivation, or else it's an issue to be fixed. Also, I know that I've mentioned a lot about like work and achievement stuff here, but this proving energy is around like anything that you think will make you worthy. So for many people, that energy often does happen to be around like how much money you make or around like literal physical material resources, but it can also be like your physical appearance. So if I was just more attractive or thinner or more tan or more muscular, like I would be more valuable. Or maybe it's like who you hang out with. Like if these people just accepted me, then I would be worthwhile. Maybe it's just what kind of lifestyle you lead. It could be like how many rounds of Yahtzee you're winning, right? Like it can get super petty, whatever. So it's just so important for these people to let go of trying to obtain those things just because they think they will make them more worthy or respectable or worthwhile to others. It doesn't mean that you have to give up on all your goals or stop wanting to achieve certain things, but you have to ask yourself why you're doing it, really. Everybody does, but this is a particularly important question for the undefined heart center. Because if they get caught up in that game, then they're going to have a much harder time accepting their own personal worth, especially if they don't feel like they have achieved that thing. And really, really important, they will be pulled away from the things that actually make them happy and satisfy them in life and even provide for them in life. And the last thing to know here is that because they don't have that consistent willpower energy, they're not here to make promises. And what I mean by that is they're not supposed to make promises about what they can do based on their willpower, because they kind of don't know whether they're going to be able to come through on that via their willpower. Their willpower is inconsistent. So it may be here today, but it may not be here later. So even if they have the best of intentions, if they make a promise, especially a promise that feels like it's kind of like there to push them to prove themselves in any way, like even if it means like proving that you're a caring friend or proving that, you can help someone else or you would do something for someone else, you might not be able to do that with an undefined heart center. Like even if you really, really wish you could or want to be able to do it because you really want to make good on that promise. And it's not just about making promises to others, it's about making promises to yourself. So something really common is someone with an undefined heart center will want to make a change in their life, like kick a habit or commit to some kind of new habit. So they'll go, okay, here's the plan. I'm going to follow this program and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z every day. And I'm going to stick to this. And if I've done it before and I haven't been able to do it, this time I'm going to stick to it. And then they keep finding themselves not doing it. And they'll go, what's wrong with me? Like, why am I so weak? I made a promise to myself. I can't even hold a promise to myself. I have no willpower. I'm such a weak person. And they're absolutely not. It's just that they're asking the wrong question of themselves. So they're asking like whether or not they can commit to something through willpower. And that's really not the move. So if they live their life that way, they're going to be very disappointed with themselves and think they can't achieve anything, which isn't true. So it's actually crucial for them to make sure that they're looking to their authority instead of willpower energy when it comes to committing things. Because it's not that you can't make good on something that you said you'd do. That's not the case. It's that when it's coming from this heart center energy of like, I'm going to need willpower to like follow through on this, or like, I promise you I will do this. That's not the right source here. It needs to be dependent on an energy that you actually have consistently, or if you're a reflector, you've given yourself enough time to feel through this and determine whether or not it's actually right for you. So your authority is the energy that you can actually depend on to tell you if you are going to be able to do this thing. So whether or not you can actually say yes or no to this thing and then make good on it. So let's say that you have sacral authority and an undefined heart center. So that's me, or Danielle, or it's like my mom. So when someone asks us to do something, then it would not be about asking ourselves, do I have the willpower to do this? Do I have the drive? Can I do this? It's, do I want to do this? On the other hand, if you have something like splenic authority, it's intuitively, does this feel like a yes or a no to me? What is my instinct telling me? What is my instinctual intuition telling me, even if I don't know why, et cetera, et cetera. So this is going to give you much more accurate information on where to put your energy for success in whatever situation. So if you're like, yeah, I can do it, or I think I can do it. I'm going to have to push, but I can do it. No, stop doing that. I can't actually tell you how to live your life. That was a little aggressive, but I do not recommend it, is what I'm trying to say. So in its healthy expression, the undefined heart center knows it has nothing to prove. It knows that it's already worthy, and it does not need to do anything to show that. It understands it has nothing to do with how many resources it obtains. It has nothing to do with how many goals it hits. The undefined heart center has this beautiful sense of self-worth simply in just being who they are. It knows that any pressure to prove who they are can flow through them because it is just really none of their concern. They also can ride the motivation of the defined heart center energy of other people when it's right for them. So when their strategy and authority say, hey, yeah, I do want to do this thing, and now there's this motivation energy around me that I can kind of take advantage of, let's use this. Let's use this to be a little bit more motivated than usual and get more things done. It's to my advantage. Why not? Like I said before too, they are great at knowing who is capable and also who isn't. The thing about the undefined heart center is it's a great example of how we learn to become wise in our undefined centers, because we have potential for wisdom in our undefined centers. It's not that we're necessarily born with them. And something good to know here is that we can have this really like big fear of being tricked with the undefined heart center and then made to feel like we're worthless because like we should have known better. We should have known that that person was a snake oil salesman, or that person wasn't going to fulfill their promise. But oftentimes we have to like maybe go through that once or twice, or maybe quite a few times, to be able to identify it more easily. And then we can become incredibly like sharp critics of people, and not in a bad way, not critical. Maybe critic isn't really the right word here. Sharp judges, I guess we should say, of who is truly capable of fulfilling a promise and who is not. Actually, we can become like really, really, really good at it. So you can even look back on times before and compare times when someone really felt like they were going to come through on something and when someone really didn't feel like they were going to come through on something, and just check in, like, how did that feel? Or you thought someone would come through on something and they didn't. Again, check in with how your body felt. Like, was there this little feeling of like, something's a little off, but they say that they're going to help me achieve this thing or feel better or whatever. So how did you feel back then? What did you learn from that? And always looking back on these past experiences, I think this is helpful for anyone, no matter what your design, looking back on these experiences and asking, like, what really did I learn from that? Because I can tell you that with my undefined heart center, especially as I've lived my design more and more over the years, like, I've noticed that I am really, really good at being able to tell who is going to bring me value and who isn't. And also who's like I don't want to say who's lying to me, but when someone comes over and tries to sell something to me, I'm like, I don't know why, but I can just tell. I can just tell that you can't fulfill that thing that you're saying you're going to do. So that's actually a huge benefit to having this. Another thing that I didn't write here is that these people are also good at seeing value from other people's perspectives. So whereas the Defined Heart Center really determines value for itself and it's fixed and it's only from their perspective, someone with an Undefined Heart Center can actually experience that from multiple different perspectives and understand why someone would value something where somebody else would not. And then lastly, these people are really, really good at helping other people see the inherent value in who they are as a person, because they don't just see who is capable of doing things. They can also, especially when they accept this in themselves, like help other people see that they are just already valuable, that they also don't have anything to prove if they have an undefined heart center. And then if the other person has a defined heart center, we are really good at honing in and saying like, look at how good you are at doing this thing, or look at how good you are at bringing value here. You can do this. Like, we're really good at, sure, seeing like who's maybe not going to be able to pull through on something, but also where someone really is and help them see that too. Because people with defined heart centers can have doubts all the time. They might think, oh, I don't know if I can do that, but we can sense it and we can go in and say like, no, you really can do this. Or we can tell them like, maybe not this, maybe this isn't the thing for you. So in misalignment, the Undefined Heart Center will waste a lot of its life trying to prove it matters. And it's a waste of time because you already matter, regardless of how many promises you can make and fulfill, or how many goals you can achieve, or how much money you can make, or how hot of a partner you have, whatever. And also because, again, this energy that you're feeling, this pressure to prove yourself, if you're ever feeling that, it's not even coming from you. So it's not an energy that you need to concern yourself with. And it is a waste of time to try to get rid of it by taking some kind of action. Instead, it's about letting this flow through you and not identifying with it so much, especially if it doesn't feel like it's going to benefit you. And then, of course, it will make promises that it can't really keep. So they will make promises to themselves or to other people and then probably beat themselves up when they can't fulfill it, which often leads to low self-worth. Or these people will just naturally feel like they're missing something and thus have low self-worth. And then it gets into that cycle of like, I have to do something, I have to do something, anything to prove that I am enough because I don't feel like I naturally am. They'll also fall into overwork, trying to overachieve all the time or just being overachievers, and then probably being like way too competitive. And the thing is that there's no issue with having natural ambition or being competitive. Like, that's not really a problem. I'm not competitive, but I do have natural ambition. But the thing is that most of the time, this is coming from more of like this scarcity place, right? There are people who are built to be very competitive, and it doesn't actually come from this like, I don't feel like I'm good enough if I don't compete and win. They just naturally are driven to do that. And it's actually a part of some people's designs. And it comes from a truly aligned place. But oftentimes with the Undefined Heart Center, you really need to check in and make sure that that's the reason why you're being competitive, and it's not because it's out of a place of like proving yourself or like there can only be one, right? And you'll know the difference between true soulful desire to do something or even to compete and this unaligned pressure, because in the second scenario, if you imagine not doing that thing, you'll get this feeling like you won't matter. Like, if I don't do this thing, people will think X about me, or they won't even think about me at all. Or, why am I even here? Or I'll look bad or something like that. And when we follow that, that is how we get into toxic overachievement of the Undefined Heart Center. And then one last thing to know here too, that I didn't write down, but is a good note, is the misalignment of the Undefined Heart Center can be pretty difficult to identify, at least at first, because we are all trained to operate like people with defined heart centers. So we think that's supposed to be normal, yet 2/3 of us aren't built that way. We're not built to be motivated all the time, and we don't need to be. So if we already think that we should be pushing ourselves all the time and hard on ourselves and should be expecting ourselves to be motivated, that means that when we pick up on heart center energy from some kind of outside source, we're not really trained to think that it's an issue to identify with it. Like, we're not trained to even be aware that's happening. So heart center energy conditioning can be really, really sneaky, and is often one of those things that can take quite a bit of time to decondition from. because it's one of those things where the world really presses us to go with our conditioning. So my advice to you with an undefined heart center is, first off, my friend, you matter so much. You are so worthy. Even if it doesn't feel like that's what's being reflected back at you right now, it's the truth. And it does not depend on how much you do or how many resources you create or obtain or whatever. It's inherent to you. Secondly, like, you don't need to be consistently motivated to hit your goals, be successful, or even make money. Like, please remember that. I can think of so many times where actually identifying with that ego center energy has totally gotten in the way for me because I've been focusing on the wrong thing. Like, I thought that doing this, taking this action or pushing through or working when I wasn't feeling motivated was going to get me to where I wanted to be faster. And it actually just got in the way in one way or another because I either did something that like didn't give me the result. And I was like, all this work was put into nothing. It was bullshit. Or I just burnt myself out. And then finally, motivation is not a consistent form of wisdom for you. So instead, when you are deciding on what to do, whether that is making a promise to yourself or to others, or setting a goal, whatever, which I guess is like kind of a promise to yourself, but it's just really important to follow your strategy and authority instead of depending on this heart center energy. So the not self question here is, do I have something to prove? And there are some questions where I rephrase them because I don't know that that's actually even the best question to ask, but this one is so perfect. I really don't have to do that. It says it all. So if you are doing something for the sole reason of proving yourself, think again about whether or not you really want to do it. Because if you're doing it from this proving energy, it's very, very likely that you are doing this from the not self. So something that's not actually in alignment for you. It's not the true you. And I'll tell you that this is a very, very important question for most of us with undefined heart centers, because if you have an undefined heart center, that energy is always going to be the strongest conditioning force on your aura, meaning this is always going to be the core reason that you would get pulled out of alignment and start living in your not self, aka the conditioned self. Like usually, and we'll get to this when we get to the not self hierarchy, but when you act out of alignment with your human design chart, even if you have plenty of other undefined centers in your chart and you're seeing yourself take actions out of those, it actually almost always, no, I will say it always starts with the undefined heart center, even if it's showing up through actions that you're taking in different places. So when things are not going right, when you are in your not self theme of anger, bitterness, frustration, disappointment, whatever your energy type's not self theme is, it's probably starting here. So this is a really, really good question to be asking yourself if you feel stuck and in a crunchy place in your life, because this can cause a lot of dissonance. But if you know that, you can prevent it. You can stop identifying with this energy. You can nip it in the bud. And I can tell you, actually, I cannot tell you how many times this has saved my ass, and very quickly, because I know that I take on proving energy. And when I do that and I identify with it, things just feel hard. Life feels hard. I get into frustration as a generator. So I ask myself, do I think I have something to prove? And it can very, very quickly unravel the issue for me. And I can easily see where I'm acting out of alignment because I'm trying to prove myself. It's not always easy because it can feel like we have a lot to lose when we don't prove ourselves, but it does make things smoother and simpler because I can basically call back my energy and go, nope, that is not the thing for me. And I can make space and save my energy for what is actually correct for me and feels good and will move me forward.